Well, I'm Stuart Bounds, and I came to college in 1984, and I came as executive vice president. Um, they, they were recruiting, I guess, nationwide or at least regionally, and I was working in the Virginia Community College system at the time. I'm a native of the Eastern Shore. Our families, my wife's family and my family, go back to the late 1600s in Somerset County. And so when I saw the ad for the position at the college, I was excited because it was our home. Not so much Queen Anne's County, but the Eastern Shore. And so I came in 1984. Over the years, the position kind of changed somewhat as the college grew. We decided to separate the responsibilities. I was both the chief academic officer and the chief administrative officer, if you can imagine. Those two sets of skills are not, to the extent that I had them, they're certainly not common. And eventually, frankly, when they interviewed me here at the college in the old boardroom, they saw it as they were recruiting, if not recruiting, they were certainly wanting to bring somebody in at a level that when Bob Schlager, who was the president at that point, and he was only the second president, when Bob Schlager retired, that they'd have somebody in place, not a guarantee of a job, but just that they'd have somebody that they were recruiting to possibly move into that position. And I think they were looking for somebody who had roots in the shore. And we had lots of roots, although not in this part of the shore, and which, as I got to know it's really quite different in many respects than the lower shore. And so eventually in 1997, after I served, I think it was about 6 months as the acting president, when Bob Schlager took a sabbatical leave while he was still in office here. I was here for about 6 months, and having nothing to do with Bob Schlager leaving, but the state went through a huge financial crisis at that point. It was really a difficult time for us. But in any event, I served in that capacity. And then in 1997, between Bob Schlager and myself was Jack Catula. And Jack Catula had come only to be here for 5 years. He made that pretty explicit. He came out of the Delaware Tech system. And I was elected president in 1997. So I retired as president in 2008. And I came back in 2017 for a year to serve as interim president, and I helped the board of trustees recruit a new president, who is fortunately still here. I mean, we really worked hard to bring some into the college, someone here who would fit in with the rural culture and with not just the mission of a community college, but more importantly, the kind of governance structure that we have here in Maryland. And so Cliff was just a perfect match, and it was a wonderful day when he came in at the end of May for after the end of my year, and we could welcome him into the presidency. So that's a kind of a nutshell. Chesapeake College was, first of all, a unique community college in Maryland, then and now. And I mean unique literally. It was one of a kind. And in that respect, it was because it was sponsored, by the time I came, by 5 counties kind of a regional sponsorship. And since the college was founded, there are 2 other regional colleges now, community colleges in Maryland, but none of them under the same governance structure that we have, or as complex a structure as we have, with 5 separate counties with different governance cultures and different needs and different capabilities to help finance the work of a community college. But I think that's just one key difference, is that while we're still a regional community college, the difference, I would say, was then the counties seemed to take more active involvement and oversight. I don't want to overuse that word, but they really paid a lot of attention and were very supportive. So for me, coming in from the Virginia Community College system, which is where I grew up in the community college world, it was a highly the Virginia system was a highly centralized system, a lot of regulations. Maryland couldn't be more different. It was a very decentralized system. Local boards had full authority over their institutions. We didn't even have a state agency that oversaw the work of community college, at least in the sense of having governance authority. We had some state agencies that we had to work with for a variety of things, but the governing board was the governing board of the college, the Board of Trustees. But then we had 3 county administrators who were very professional in their field, who were, I would just say, well prepared for the work with the counties, because they came out of really good schools for local governments. And they were enormously helpful to the college and just nurtured us in those days. It's not that they don't today, but they take it for granted. The school's been a success. It served an enormous number of their citizens, and they know that and they appreciate that. But then they were still in the kind of nurturing phase. So I think that was one of the differences, and that was really good for me, because I worked in community college. Certainly not a president, and I wasn't a president when I came here. But it was just an opportunity, a lot of opportunity for me, for my growth, but also for the growth and experimentation of the community college structure here on the Upper Shore. That's one difference. A second difference, the student culture was vastly different then. You can see it in the photos downstairs, but most of the community colleges in the country either started out literally as vocational technical schools, or that was the central part of their mission. Most of them also did college transfer work, but it was not their primary charge. And that was true of Virginia. So I came out of this system, and it was a state system that was focused initially, when it was founded, on career and technical education, which is what we, I think, still call it today. And but Chesapeake was what I would describe as, you would think it was a private, publicly funded liberal arts college. And because it had all the trappings, for example, I mean, this is a small school. It was, I think we're probably still the 3rd smallest in the system in Maryland. We were probably the same then, but a very small school in its very early years. And but we had a full-time professor in music. We had the same in art. If you just looked at the faculty and to see the disciplines that it represented, and then if you looked at the schedule of classes, it's vastly different today. In part because, and community colleges in general, this is true of, but certainly here in Maryland and certainly here at Chesapeake, we've made, the boards have made deliberate efforts to greatly strengthen the career in technical education. You can see it in the new, relatively new nursing and allied health building. And I'm sure I have the name of that building wrong, but it was built after I was here, so that's my excuse. And but you can see it in that, and you can see it in the just the recruitment of Bob Schlager, my predecessor. They went out, brought Bob in from Hastings, Nebraska, which had a very strong, then called vocational education curriculum, kind of nationally respected in many respects. And they brought him in deliberately because they wanted to strengthen that whole area of our curriculum. And most recently, when the charge gave me my board to go out and help organize the search for a new president, it was to get someone in here who could strengthen and help support the economic development of the communities more directly that we serve through strong educational preparation of and building a workforce out of that curriculum. So, but then it looked just like a small liberal arts college, and the activities looked that way. And it was really different coming out of the community colleges in Virginia, not just because of the curriculum differences, but because it was just about preparing students for the first 2 years of a baccalaureate degree. That's really how the Maryland system developed for the most part. There are some exceptions, but it's pretty commonplace. The degrees themselves, the way they were structured in Maryland, the general education program, that was all focused on that transfer mission. And I remember talking to some of the county commissioners and to one of my mentors at the time, asking about, trying to learn about the college and the community, and about what the expectations were, in the next decade or whatever for the college. And they said, oh, well, we're Chesapeake College, and we just, the local thinking is that someday we'll be a baccalaureate institution. And when Chesapeake was founded, it was founded as Chesapeake College in Maryland. And I was just trying to think if there was an exception to this, but I can't think of one. I don't think any other community college in Maryland was founded as Montgomery College, which it is today. It was Montgomery Junior College, but they used this name, and I think in one of the summaries that was written on the history of the college, I think it pointed out that they were hoping someday that it was going to be a full collegiate institution, as they saw it. And so to me, that sounds like, well, that's not who we are as a community college as a whole. But I'm smart enough to keep my mouth shut and just listen. So that was another difference. And the third thing I would say that struck me was the relationship to particularly two counties, Talbot and Queen Anne's, but not exclusively, just those two. The kind of events that occurred at the college, we haven't seen probably for the last 2 decades here, or 3 decades even, because it was shortly after I came that we began to move away and continue to build the career and technology area. But I'll give 3 quick examples that I recall. One was we used to host a Queen Anne's County Day, and it was like a country fair. And some of the artifacts are still around, and Bob Schlager was a big promoter of that because he lived right in Queen Anne's County, and it just was impressive to me that the communities, the counties, saw the college as something they say looked up to is probably the wrong phrase, but they respected and they liked having things here on the campus. I mean, we did a lot of other things in the time that I was here as president, but that was one thing that was really different. A second thing that was really different is that the college had its own press, the Chesapeake College Press. And it published, and I think it still exists as an account, but it's dormant. It published about 4 or 5 works. Marcy may know better, but 4 or 5 works. And it was primarily because kind of my predecessor here, Hal Jopp, he had an immense interest in local history. And so it was part of his vision to have this press. And in fact, he wrote, I think, 3 or 4 of the books themselves. But the concept was to publish things about the shore or about the Chesapeake Bay region that otherwise would not get published because there just wouldn't be a big enough audience. And the things that were published were, in my judgment, of high quality, but what an unusual thing to find, right? And, but connected to that was another annual tradition, which was, it was called Eastern Shore Culture Week. And they would, whoever would organize it every year, it had a different theme. Some of the books that Hal Jopp wrote came out of that Eastern Shore Culture Week. For example, one was about the grand hotels on the bay, you know, in the Upper Shore area. But many other things that were held. For example, they had local artists, so they did a big bringing Eastern Shore artists in to come in and talk about their work and so on and so forth. They had one with people, Eastern Shore writers. In fact, they did that 2 or 3 times, who came. Historians, storytellers, you name it, any aspect of culture. And it was quite an affair. It drew a lot of people. And good heavens, we had so little space to do those kinds of things in those days. But they were really, to me, very different things for a community. Not that it was contradictory to the idea of a community college, but it just represented a cultural difference from my perspective. I mean, some of those things got transitioned into other traditions here. I hope that we will always maintain that close tie to our counties. But of course, this room that I'm in, the Chesapeake room, it really, I assume, still continues to hold all the private donations that people have given over the years to help focus on this region and its importance to the state. So that's their ways. There are many other examples, but I'm not going to take your time with it. But it had this really interesting relationship with its support counties, and doing some really interesting things that you would rarely find at any other community college, at least to my knowledge. Well, I mean, we obviously had more faculty. I mean, just as a function of growth. Obviously, we were also promoting and developing curricula in the career and technology area. So just from the numbers of faculty and disciplines that they represented, that was different. The nursing program, which is another whole story, but the nursing program also, we didn't have a nursing program when I came. But I soon learned that Chesapeake had a number of little relationships that most people either didn't know they existed, or if they did, they really couldn't figure out what was going on. And nursing was an example. In those days, what we did is and we did this in 2 areas. Nursing was one. We actually delivered all of the general education for a diploma program in nursing at Easton Memorial Hospital. And we didn't award the degree. It was awarded by the hospital. But we gave all the general education, you know, the A&P courses or the science, well, A&P is science, the A&P and chemistry and, you know, English and history, all that was to some extent part of a diploma program. We delivered that instruction. But to the outsider, you wouldn't have known that we were involved in any way, shape, or form in the nursing program because it was all happening off campus. Similarly, the Natural Resources Police, probably not a familiar organization to most people anyhow, and they've been around for a long time. They have an academy that sits up right on the bay, right, almost adjacent to the Bay Bridge practically. But when I came, we were delivering instruction as part of that. It wasn't a degree program, but you know, they were trying to broaden their instructional base for their students and not just about, you know, marine life and stuff like that. And so we were fairly heavily involved in helping to support that program. And so those were kind of some of the relationships that existed. You know, the efforts to build a career and technology program were moving along, and we had some new programs coming online, but it was a struggle, and it would be continued to be a struggle even today. And we probably don't want to get in all of the issues with that, but you know, it has more to do with the culture of higher education today and expectations of parents and students and so on and so forth. But you know, that's pretty much what was happening on campus with respect to the faculty. One of the interesting things that existed here is, in those days, our faculty had tenure, and very few community colleges adopted the tenure system as they were founded, and most of them were founded in the 60s. Even some of the older community colleges that go way back in time in the turn of the 20th century, didn't generally adopt that piece of higher education. But we had it here, and most Maryland community colleges did. Again, it reflected that growth coming out of the transfer program. And so that was a big, it really had an impact on the curriculum. And that was certainly, I won't say a challenge, that was a new experience for me, because it just something you have to approach the way you work with faculty. And today, of course, we're working in a union environment. So that was different, and part of a broad tradition in Maryland, I might add. The other thing I'd say, just in finishing about the campus as a whole, it was kind of, well, what's a phrase I like? It kind of invented itself. Because Maryland didn't have a regulatory state system, I mean regulatory in the environment, in the sense that you had the state writing policies and procedures and stuff like that. Because you didn't have that, and because these governing boards were fully autonomous from one another, they had to develop everything from scratch. And I came out of a system which was just the opposite. So if you had a significant problem with an area you didn't have any experience with or expertise in, you could go in Virginia and bring in the state resources, bring in lawyers from the state to help you deal with the problem. And so smaller community colleges, although the one I worked in was a larger one, they had a lot of resources to draw on. And so there's a lot of consistency throughout the system in the way things were done and the rules and the regulations and things of that sort. And being the chief administrative officer here, I mean, that was a big part of my responsibility. And then realizing that there were a lot of things that were not in place here at the college. So there was a lot of work to be done. I'm not suggesting things were not as they should be. It was a different administrative culture. But higher education nationally was changing, and with federal financial aid, so you had to begin to look more carefully at some issues that heretofore they weren't as decisive in how you dealt with them. But it became more and more largely because of the federal role in financial aid, but not only for that reason. And today it's even more so. It's a very different culture of work today than it was when I first came. It was a very personal environment. The faculty functioned as a small family. And if anything, any problem developed with one of them, they were all involved in it. And the same was true for the staff. And it took me a while to get used to it because I came out of a school that was more urbanized. It was right in the city of Newport News. And I couldn't figure it out sometimes. It would amaze me that everybody would know about something but me, And it's because I wasn't necessarily tied into all the people who really were in the know kind of thing. It's partially because we were small, but it wasn't just that. There was a wonderful sense of community. The staff, the faculty were proud of the school. They were proud of what they were doing, and they were very supportive of one another. And of course, I was an outsider when I came. Luckily, I was not completely an outsider because I grew up on the shore, and while I didn't know these counties that well, I certainly knew a good deal about the culture of the shore. So that was another area. The culture of the campus was different. I think we still have that today. When I came back to recruit Cliff, I felt like it was there. It was let's see, it was struggling in some respects. Part of that was due to a whole lot of other factors that were happening in higher education. But some of it's just the changes in administration in the counties and things of that kind.
Working here?
I think my wife was a teacher here, and she was a good one. I would always teach a course here because I wanted to stay connected to the students, but I was not a great teacher. What I enjoyed the most was having a feeling on occasion that there was either a challenge or a problem here at the college that we needed to really get addressed. I'll just give you one example. We were having an increased number, and this was after I came, maybe a decade after I came, at least so. And right out here at the intersection on Route 50, we had a series of accidents at that intersection, and I think we had at least 2 student deaths during that period, and. Because we're a small community, when something like that happens, a great many students knew this person or a great many faculty knew this person. And it really affected, I think, the sense of vulnerability that we had, the increased traffic flow and the risk because the intersection here wasn't built for the colleges it was developing. And while there were long-range plans to strengthen it, it was 10 years off, 20 years off. But we were having kids trying to turn in and make a left here to get into the college and getting sideswiped. And I went and I think Queen Anne's County was obviously the local government that was most involved with helping us because we're physically in the county. And it was an improvement that we had to get them to make a priority to get the state to pay attention to it, to blah, 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 blah. And we were able to do that finally and to get some major improvements. Still not what it needs to be, but it was a sense of community, everybody coming together, because I wanted some people to go talk to the county commissioners and stuff like that, and so they could feel its impact on the campus. And it was just a wonderful experience, and that's what I enjoyed so much, was being able to see where I could make a difference. I could be helpful from whatever skills and talents that I might have to kind of do that. And so whenever those opportunities came along, I just really enjoyed, getting involved with them. Well, I think I'm not going to be very helpful here because I know very little about it because that happened before I came. What I know is this: just as a baseline, the college was founded by 4 of the 5 counties that make up the Midshore today. Dorchester was not one of them. I know from growing up on the Lower Shore that one of the reasons for that was that they are very oriented toward the Lower Shore. It's if they're going to a hospital, they'll go down to Peninsula General, or they'll shop in Salisbury. That was been their orientation. And the Choptank River has often been seen by a lot of writers, H.L. Mencken being one of them, was kind of a dividing line in Maryland, almost between the Mid-Atlantic and the South. And so just culturally, they were more connected. I know that one of the issues that arose fairly quickly after the college was founded, and certainly before I came, was a nursing program, because there was a need for an associate degree program in nursing here on the shore. And Warwick Community College, which was covered 2 of the 3 lower shore counties, they were performing that mission under an agreement that was reached between Bob Schlager and Arnie Maynor, who was the president at Warwick then. So we kind of stayed out of Dorchester County because the only thing Dorchester County was participating in was a nursing program down at Warwick. Later, Warwick expanded and added they were a police academy, and still are, for the shore. And so again, that drew Dorchester County more to the Lower Shore. Excuse me a minute. And I think Bob Schlager really wanted to build the relationship we had with Memorial Hospital into a program. And I don't know, though, and I just never thought to ask him, I suppose. I don't know that was a factor or had anything to do with the ultimate decision of the county to join the college. I've been talking to a number of people here at the college about the need to document that decision, if only because to better understand what in the mind of Dorchester County they were expecting, because there are a lot of issues that are going to continue to develop and challenge the counties, sometimes creating friction among them. And we've certainly got to be able to navigate that and be seen as a source of remedy and certainly not as a problem. And but I would say we just don't have the documentation here now. And fortunately, there are still a few people alive who were part of that process. And that's as much as I can tell you. When I came, we had a very small center down in Cambridge in what used to be either a middle school or an elementary school, and it was small. And it looked like an elementary school. And it was just not located in a very convenient place. And later on, when Jack Catula was president, the opportunity came up to get some state support, and we bought a former department store in Cambridge, which was closing, along with a lot of other things in Cambridge at the time. And then we opened the center that we have there today, which is at least more centralized from the perspective of where our students come from to come to that center. So just in terms of Dorchester County, that's as much as I can tell you. But I think it's very important that we spend the time to pull together the motivations and how it relates to the provisions in the state legislation that created the college and the governance structure that we have. And so that we can make sure that all the parties to the compact are tuned in to what we're trying to accomplish and what their obligations are and what our obligations are. Well, well, I would say in part that while we're obviously not the only community college on the Eastern Shore, I think we're the most culturally tuned in to our old colleague down at Warwick would probably disagree with this, but I just think because we made such an effort to reach out culturally to the community and celebrate that in ways that are not otherwise replicated, I think, among the other community colleges here. But I would say that's kind of an obvious point. To me, what we've been able to do is to make a 5-county project, compact, work, when the whole idea that you could get any 2 counties in Maryland to work together and work in collaboration and finance institution of higher education is hard work. There are not many successful efforts around the country, but 5 counties, and under what I think is an excellent governance structure that we have here, but it's been work, and we've had little challenges along the way, and some disputes we've had to settle with one or more of our counties. But they know that the college is a key source of the collaboration among the counties on a host of other issues. When I was here, and I'm not taking credit for it, but when I was here, there was a big issue about solid waste disposal. Well, this is a far cry from teaching in a community college, but it was a big issue, as it was. How are they going to handle the volume of solid waste that they were developing? Particularly when some counties had the capacity for it in space that wasn't developed in terms of housing and a lot of agriculture, and others did not. And of course, the ones that did not, they had they had a lot of the solid waste, trying to figure out a problem. Well, because the college had served as a regional point of discussions on all issues relating to these counties, they came to the college. They used us to come together, and the agreement that they reached with all the county except Dorchester, because Dorchester otherwise participates in something with the Lower Shore. it still works today. They had a cycling schedule around, among the 4 counties for, whose landfill would go first, and blah blah blah. What were their responsibilities? But the fact that they came here and met here to do that, the midshore transportation system that exists today. Granted, it's not a lot, but it provides some pretty vital capacity to move people throughout the region. That was developed here at the college, and in more direct collaboration with us, because we needed transportation here. We needed to pick up students and take them to Easton or Cambridge or wherever. So we were actively involved in that. Today we are the only community college in Maryland, and there are not many around the country, that host the Private Industry Council. These are created through federal legislation to help support economic development and times when you get big closures and have to find replacement jobs for your citizens and things of that kind. So these things were created through federal law, and federal money goes in to help do a whole host of things. But in our case, the counties decided right off the bat they wanted the college to host the Private Industry Council, and we still do that today. Like I said, we're the only surviving one that's doing it. It's kind of a jealously guarded privilege, but I think to the credit of the college, we've done such a good job of hosting it and help tie the counties in a support role with it, that it's flourished, and it's done a lot of things for us. Our truck driver training program would not exist except for the Private Industry Council, which funds a lot of the scholarships for the students who go into it. And you can go on, and I would if you let me, but you better not. There's just so many times when the counties came to the college to work out agreements, to find ways to help support the college, and to iron out differences among themselves on supporting the college. That's been a big contribution. We've made this experiment, which is what it was, at the time that Senator Harry Hughes, then Governor Hughes, led the effort to really write the legislation to create the college. It was by no means a slam dunk that it could hold together. And at least I preach constantly with all the community individuals that I have contact with even today of how important that partnership has been to the communities. I mean, just as if you took the cost of running the college and did it on a per capita basis and divided it up on a population base. So you go to, let's just say up at Cecil County, there are colleges about the size of Chesapeake. A population in the single county that supports them is fairly significant, and I don't know if they're more or less. We're probably 180,000 today or something like that. But the per capita cost to that county is easily double what it is to the 5 counties that are working to support the college here. And so it's been a bargain for them. But the reason why it's been a bargain is in part because Harry Hughes wrote some very favorable legislation for Chesapeake College that I don't know if it could have kept this partnership going without it. Just as a quick example, the state pays for 75% of the cost of all capital construction here. For the counties, otherwise, for public education, they average, depends on the wealth of the county, they average about 50% or 45% in a more wealthy area. Likewise, the community colleges, who are not part of these multiple partnerships, our partners are paying, the counties are paying in those same structures that the public schools get paid by. So we get a lot more support from the state for our capital development. And the wonderful buildings, this building that you see here, that's possible because of that wonderful formula that 3/4 of the costs are covered by the state once it gets approved. I have a lot of passions, and one of those passions is to realize the promise to our citizens to open up access to higher education, and for all of our citizens to make that available. A project that I had when I was retiring is I did some research on the something called the Truman Commission report in 1947. And without getting into it, just suffice it to say that the vision for creating a public community college system that would reach out and guarantee access to all of our citizens was a centerpiece of that Truman Commission report in 1947. And here's why. Because Truman, and he was active in this commission, Truman argued that in 1947 we had these, I guess, literally millions of people coming home back to the States from World War II. And for many of those people coming home, they did not have equal access to the benefits of this country. And they certainly didn't have it in higher education. When that report was written, not only were Black Americans shifted over to their own segregated system and not admitted into public institutions, but other minority groups did not have access, and the whole one of the whole causes and commitments as a result of the war, as a result of the victory, was that something like the Holocaust would not repeat itself. And in those days in higher education, except at Jewish institutions, it was very hard for Jews to get into many of the elite institutions. And so Truman felt like, what an irony. You've got all these young people who want, they feel so proud of what they accomplished in Europe and over in Asia, and at great cost. But what do we have for them here left at home? And I guess what I would say to students in the future, we've got an obligation that you need to embrace and demand, and to seek out the support that you need from whatever walk of life that you or your family circumstances are in to reach that promise. The promise is not just to get in to a college. It's about finishing, right? And it's about finishing with the kind of knowledge and skills that you're going to need to really make a contribution in this world. And that's another area where, sadly to say, curriculum throughout higher education is struggling to fulfill that goal. So it's not unique to community colleges, but it's a huge challenge. I mean, the world as it is today, the sense of community, of common values, there's the sense of our humanity, it seems to me, was a big part of both what our public school system helped build and what our higher education system helped build. Not perfectly by any means, but it's slipping away. And so unfortunately, that's not something easily or quickly addressed. But what is important is that we deliver, both as a state and as a locality in terms of funding our school systems, and certainly as a nation on ensuring that access, particularly for those who've not found um, who've not found that avenue, if you will, to getting into higher education and building the knowledge base to fulfill the potential in life. And we've got a two-class society. I guess we've had it for some time, but the gap between the privileged elite, if you will, and I don't mean that as suggesting that it's just a matter of money. It's a matter of your life experience, right? And they're just two playing fields that we're playing on. And one is succeeding enormously, but a vast majority is not. And that's the core of what a community college is. That's what we're all about. If we do nothing else, we make a difference in narrowing that gap. And there's a lot against us, stacked up against us, with all the challenges we face in the nation and in the world. But it's so much the core of who we are. And I encourage anybody, if you're not familiar with the Truman Commission report, to read it, because it'll really open your eyes to um, an idea, an ideal, if you will, and and that's, I think, what drove me into work that I spent my entire life doing. These are wonderful resources here, and we've got the higher ed center here as well, and I don't know how many students we process through. When I say we, the schools that participate in that, how many students go through that now, but just the fact that you can continue beyond an associate's degree and and complete a baccalaureate or even a graduate degree without having to travel some distance to do so, or do it online. I think that's significant, and that's something that we are proud of having put that together as well. But I'm sure, if I think Debbie Erie, if she still runs the center there, just across the road here, I'm sure there are fiscal issues that they're dealing with that kind of need to be supported and addressed. So that's something we didn't get a chance to kind of touch on, but um, I was lucky to work in a field that I had just a passion for. I think you asked me that question earlier. What what excited me, and I didn't have it in a traditional sense of a teacher who has that more direct sense of seeing a student grow in some ways, but it is in the sense of knowing that we were serving and graduating and we were developing opportunity that wasn't here when I came. And that would be true of anybody who takes on the role of president. But it is a great sense of satisfaction. And I always encourage my children, you know, seek a career, seek a job that you get reward from and that you have some level of passion about the work that you're doing, so that you can take pride in it. And that's just the greatest opportunity you can have. And to me, the community college is a big stepping stone for that.